Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Zee Cohen-Sanchez, executive director at Strategist. Zee, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
As we sit here right now, we are less than a week away from Election Day, and some commentary that has been taking up a lot of headlines, a lot of space, has been commentary surrounding the term garbage. And as you know, that started on Sunday night, so let's walk through the timeline and break it down. So Sunday night, a comedian at Trump's Madison Square Garden rally said that Puerto Rico was a, quote, floating island of garbage. On Tuesday night, Harris was making what she touted as her closing argument at the Ellipse, and at the same time President Biden was making remarks. He pointed to that MSG Puerto Rico garbage, what was described as a joke. It didn't sound like a joke, and he said this, quote, "The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters." He then paused and he added this: his demonization of Latinos is unconscionable and it's un-American. What are your thoughts that we are speaking about this instead of those kitchen table issues that a lot of voters care about the most?
Yeah, I think that it's really just a terrible move for Trump's campaign to be doing this the last week of the election, especially the fact that a big part of his base are Latino men. So talking about Puerto Ricans in this way, especially in New York City, which has some of the most Puerto Ricans in the entire country, was just not a good move for his campaign. Biden's comments, that's sort of a separate issue. I'm glad, honestly, that that Biden is not running for office and that it's Kamala Harris, because I think Kamala is as sharp as a tack, and I think she understands that, yes, that comment was an awful thing to say about Puerto Ricans and about the Latino community, but also it is an opportunity for her to bring those voters in. And so making sure that she's not being more divisive in her language, I think, is the exact reason why we've chosen her to run.
How do you think she brings those voters in? Because when you look at the data up until this point, I mean, Trump was making real inroads with Latino voters, especially, to your point, Latino men. And when you look at a state like Pennsylvania that's critical in this race, critical in this election, it might come down to Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's population, 3.5% of it is Puerto Rican. So do you think that this is a real damaging moment for the Trump campaign? And how does Kamala Harris win these voters back?
It is. So actually, I was surprised to find out that actually the highest Puerto Rican the highest Puerto Rican population is Florida. It's actually not New York, and it just overtook since the pandemic. So historically, it's always been New York. And I heard Trump make some comments on basically, who really cares, right? He's not going to win that state anyway. I think he understands that, but he's very misinformed in the fact that there are 1 million Puerto Ricans across the swing states. That's a big number, especially when we're looking at the polls being this close.
And do you think other voters, maybe who are on the fence, maybe independent voters, swing voters, Nikki Haley Republicans, who think, hey, like, I'm very concerned about the economy, I don't like Trump's personality, but I'm going to vote for him anyway. Do you think this is a moment for them? And how does Kamala Harris capitalize on that?
I think that this is a great moment for her to be honest, that the Republican Party has always thought this, right? This is what they believe. It's just that now Trump has become a lot more confident, and so are his followers, supporters, but also the people that are speaking on behalf of his campaign, like in this situation, to say that quiet part out loud. And that's where we start to get dangerous. And I think that in this last week, what we really need to be doing as a Democratic Party is that we need to be telling voters that when Trump says something, to believe him. Okay, he's not just saying these things, and not just Trump, but people also that are close to Trump, that are at these rallies, that are speaking on his behalf. Trump knows what they're going to say. Trump understands, right? They have these conversations behind closed doors. Before this, he was confident enough to say that, knowing that he would not get in trouble for what he was saying. And that's the danger that Kamala has got to start talking about in this last week. She's talked about it a little bit here and there. She's mostly focused on our issues as the Democratic Party, which I think is a great thing to do. But I think at this point, people know those issues, and now we need to talk about what does it look like when we wake up on November 6th. If Trump is in office, is it going to be the type of America that they really want to see? So I think that that's what she's got to focus on.
I think that's important, and we will get to that in a moment. But before we do, as I said earlier, President Biden did step in it a bit this week. He called Trump supporters garbage. He attempted to clean it up, say it was a gaffe. I only met the one comedian, not all Trump supporters. Harris distanced herself from those comments. She said, hey, Biden clarified that, but I don't condone condemning any person based on who they vote for. So as of right now, as we sit here less than a week from Election Day, is President Biden the best messenger for the Harris campaign? How do you think Harris uses Biden in the next few days?
I don't think he is the best messenger. And I think that this is, I don't know if, I don't think that Biden meant those comments in the way that people think that he meant them. I do think that Biden is getting older, and I think that things are coming out that maybe is not the best thing for him to say. He's becoming less and less politically savvy. I think really where Biden shines and where Kamala should be using him in this last week is to interact with people in swing states. He's really personable. He's very sweet. People like him. That's the best place for him to be. The photo opportunities, kissing babies, shaking hands, all of those things. And I think that what he needs to do is let Kamala speak on behalf of the campaign at this point.
As of last night, technically biting babies, but do you think that at the White House Halloween event, but do you think parking him in Pennsylvania or a state like that where he can really connect with voters, do you think she's going to do that?
I think I'm not sure if she will, but I think that that's the best thing for him to do, is to be in the places that we know we need to win. And one of the best things I think about Biden is that at the end of the day, he really does come off as the working class, because he's been doing this job for 50 plus years. He was the youngest US senator ever elected. He was 29 years old. He's from the small working class town of Delaware. And I think people really relate to that. They want to see that working class spirit. And I think Biden is the perfect messenger for that. So placing him in PA, placing him in those places where we know that working class message is going to do well is truly the best thing he can be doing.
So now let's talk about Harris's final message, because her lip speech got a little overshadowed by the garbage back and forth. But what do you think her closing argument needs to be in the next 5 days?
I really think she's got to talk about, as we were saying, about how dangerous a Trump presidency will be. When Trump says things like, we can take care of the people on the left using the National Guard to go after regular US citizens, that's a crazy thing to say. And when people say things like that, you need to believe them, especially given Trump's track record. I really think that she needs to continuously bring up the fact that 44 of his cabinet members said that this man will be a danger to democracy if he's reelected to office. That has never happened in the history of this country. In all the years, out of all 45 presidents that we've had, not one time have we ever had that happen. That is a glaring red flag, more than a red flag. That is, the most glaring thing that we could be pointing people in the direction of understanding who they should be trusting and who they shouldn't. One of the biggest reasons why this is so concerning to me and to a lot of people out there is because Trump has become very much aware that the reason why his first term didn't look as dangerous as what his next term will look like is because he had people, including his own vice president, who were telling him no, you can't just send fake electors to the Electoral College. No, you can't, start a coup on the Capitol. No, you can't stop me from certifying these election results. He knows now who his yes men are. And at this point, he will surround himself with yes men. And he will have access to the nuclear codes while he's doing that. I don't know about everybody else, but that is not the type of America that we want to see on our side of the fence.
You're raising the red flag here. Many other Democrats are raising the alarm. The New York Times editorial board is raising the alarm, saying when Donald Trump says something, believe him. But according to polls, the top issues facing Americans, everyday Americans, aren't threats to democracy. Instead, they're the economy, inflation, immigration. So is a referendum on Trump enough? How does Harris pitch this? Because is she offering a different America, or is she just saying, hey, we're going to have the status quo if I'm elected, but if Trump's elected, that's when things get dark? Because right now, most Americans don't like the status quo.
Yeah, and that is definitely a concern. But I think that what we need to focus on as the Democratic Party is that right now we have to keep the status quo in order to continue to even have elections to get progress. So what that might look like is that if in the scenario that Donald Trump wins on November 6th or that week after election, there will potentially be no elections ever again. That could be the last election that we vote in for the presidency. And that is real danger. And that is no progress because once we have no elections, we're not electing anybody. It becomes a dictatorship. If Kamala is elected, sure. Yes, we might have the status quo for the next 4 years, but what does it look like in 2028? Is that the time for AOC to step up in primary? Is that the time for Jasmine Crockett potentially to step up in primary Kamala? I think that it opens up an entirely new realm of possibility if Kamala Harris is elected. And that is the type of democracy we want to see. We want to have a real primary in the Democratic Party. But to have a real primary, we have to have somebody that even believes in elections.
So when Republicans or other critics say that's what you're saying now is dramatic, it is hyperbolic, what do you say to that?
Well, I mean, Trump said it himself. So, Trump said himself that he will be a dictator on day one. If somebody is saying that, then we have to believe it and take it very seriously. Does that mean that he will personally stay in office? I don't really think so. I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I honestly think that at the end of this next 4 years, whether Trump wins or loses, I don't think that there will be another run for office. However, there are a lot of people that are much younger and a lot more dangerous that are ready to take the reins, including but not limited to Matt Gaetz, Elise Stefanik. The list goes on of all of these people who have that. They're ready. JD Vance is a great example. They are ready to take on Trump's message and even take it to a greater level. And also, they're not dying in the next 10 years, these folks. A lot of these people, like Elise Stefanik, she's really young. I think she's only in her early 30s. So she's got a long way to go.
I do not want to move on to the state you're in, Nevada. More Republicans than Democrats either mailed in or voted early in the Silver State. That bucks the national trend of more Democrats voting early. Does that concern you?
I think it's great. I think that it means that Democrats are getting out. And I think that that's the best thing that can happen. I do know that Trump has made comments about because I know that in his previous election, he had said, wait until election day, don't trust these mail-in ballots, yada, yada. He has not had that same rhetoric this time around. And I think that the reason why he hasn't is because he knows that he doesn't want his supporters to leave lines on election day. It's already getting to the point where in some of these swing states, we have lines for hours and hours and hours, and people have got to leave because they've got jobs and they've got kids and commitments. And so I think that he's realized that and he's now shifting the narrative. But however, does that mean that there's going to be just as many Republicans voting early as there are Democrats? I don't think so. Because historically speaking, the number of Dems that vote early is astronomically higher than those that are voting Republican early.
I know you said in our conversation last week that you're leaving it all on the field here in this final stretch. There's one weekend left that separates us between Election Day. What are you looking out for specifically between now and November 5th?
I'm looking for every single door that we could possibly knock. I'm looking for us to work the lines to death in these swing states, talk to these voters in line. Our team has been so lucky to be we are actually flipping a lot of undecided voters at this last minute. A lot of Americans who are just not engaged in the political process can't decide who they're going to vote for, and we're getting to them at the perfect moment before they mail in, before they vote early, or before they go to the polls. So that's really what I want to see us continue to do in this last 5 days, because this is going to be the most critical time. Before this, yes, it is important, obviously, to talk to people early, but typically people don't vote very early. So we really do need to make sure that in this last 5 days, we are talking to every single voter possible, and we're pushing the narrative that is the true narrative that Trump is going to be a danger if he's elected.
You're in a swing state. You're in one of those key battleground states. Is there a large swath of voters that go in line and their mind can be changed? What does that look like? And what is that conversation?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So a lot of people are going to the polls to vote specifically for one candidate usually. And so sometimes that looks different for everybody. You know, sometimes we'll talk to somebody and they're like, yeah, I'm here to vote for Jackie Rosen, for example. I'm here to vote for Dina Titus or whoever it is, right? Maybe they're personal friends. Maybe they know people that know those people. Nevada is a very small state. So it's not necessarily that people are just Trump or Harris and that's it. And that's what they're going to vote for. A lot of people are committed to those down ballot races, but not so much committed to the top of the ticket. And not so much even just here, but a place that we're seeing this the most out of every state is obviously Michigan because of the whole Muslim population. You know, we know that historically Democrats have not been the most friendly to Gaza, although they are significantly better than the Republican Party on the Gaza and Israel situation. But that has really upset a lot of Muslim voters, rightfully so. And so a lot of those folks will be going to the polls to vote down the ticket, but they will not vote for a president. And so getting to those people too, and just explaining that, you know, yes, it is a very bad situation. But what we need to do is make sure that Trump isn't there for Israel to finish the job, like he said.
Well, there is certainly a lot to look out for, as we all know, between now and November 5th. And I hope on Election Day or in the fallout after, you come on and break down whatever we see. Zee Cohen-Sanchez, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.